There's so much information on the internet when it comes to getting jacked that it's hard to know what information is worth its salt and what type of information we can essentially just discard and is a little bit overrated. Well, in today's video, I'm going to go through my 5 most overrated topics or questions when it does come to packing on size. If you're new to the channel, my name is Shane Story. I'm an online strength and physique coach, and I work with guys who are maybe a little bit like yourself, overwhelmed with all the information that they're seeing online. They're constantly chopping and changing the programs and falling prey to shiny object syndrome. And that's where my coaching comes in. I provide evidence-based solutions towards people to build the physique that they want without having to absorb all the noise of the online environment that is mostly full of bullshit. And as for myself, I compete in natural bodybuilding. I've done 10 drug-tested powerlifting competitions, and I've been training for over 15 years. And what I'm going to discuss today is not just based off theory, but it's based off all my experience and application over these years, because I've tried a lot of practices, and I can tell you some of it has been very effective and very useful, and some of it I've completely discarded and I don't bother to even pay attention to anymore. And in this video, I'm going to talk about some things I used to spend a lot of my time thinking about, whereas now I realize that they maybe don't matter all that much. Now, before we get into the video, if you do me a big favor and click like on the video if you have been enjoying my content. If you want to see more of my content and you want to help me get up to 1,000 subscribers, click subscribe. And if you have any questions or if you have any other things that you maybe think are overrated, just drop them below in the comments. First on our overrated list is what training split should I do? Now, a training split is just a way for you to distribute your volume across the week and to decide on what frequency you hit different body parts at. So the main thing that we really want to focus on when it does come to our training is, can we keep the workload of a session high? So that means that we're not having too much of a drop down in terms of mental focus through a session, and we're not getting to the point where we're not able to push as hard as we actually could. So actually increasing the frequency of hitting muscle groups across the week and distributing the volume more evenly across the week. For example, if you have 10 sets to do of quads across the week versus doing it all in one session, doing it across 2 might provide slightly better outcomes because you're getting to hit the body part as it recovers and able to keep the workload on both sessions high versus having some of that workload quality degrade as you get further into that singular leg session. And that could be where you're going from something like a bro split or body part split, where we'll just take body parts and train them individually on days, could be leveled up by going towards something like a lower upper split if you're training 4 times a week. But here's the thing, for most people, when it does come to their training split, it's going to be decided by how many times they're able to go to the gym per week anyway. So somebody who's doing a 3 times a week training split, they're probably not going to have the best gains by doing something like a legs push pull. They'd be better suited to doing something like full body 3 times a week, or doing upper lower full body, or push pull full body, because that's allowing them to split their volume up across the week and get that frequency of hitting a body part 2 times a week, which does seem, based off a lot of research, a lot better than just hitting a body part once. This is added benefit of when we increase frequency of hitting a muscle group, that we're probably repeating movements over and over again. And this is allowing us to get more proficient at certain movement patterns. And that is just going to allow you to train those movements and those muscle groups harder, faster, as you gain proficiency quicker. But then as people go from 3 times a week all the way to 4, 5, 6 times a week, these people are not only getting an increase in frequency potentially of hitting certain muscle groups, but they're also getting an increase of training volume, which is potentially one of the biggest reasons why making that move is more effective than just your split name changing. Because it's not that the name of your training split here is important. What does matter is, am I allocating enough training volume per the body parts that I want to grow across the week? When I train those body parts, can I keep the training quality high in every single session? And if I can't, can I distribute that volume across other sessions? And if I have body parts that recover slower or quicker, is there a way that I can organize the training volume or frequency within that body part to allow me to train it as frequently as it does recover? So whichever training split allows you to accomplish that for you and your goal, that's the one to go with. And that's one of the reasons why I think talking about training splits is a bit overrated, because all it comes down to is, are we distributing our volume well across the week, and it's allowing us to get a good result. Full body, upper lower, push pull legs, whatever suits you, that's the one to go with. Next on the overrated list is going to be deloads. And about a decade ago, deloading regularly, maybe every 4th or 5th week, was all the rage. And if you were doing this, you were certainly evidence-based. And the funny thing is there wasn't actually any evidence behind it when it does come to muscle gain. And it's only in the last few years there has been a singular paper that's come out looking at taking a deload during a training block when it does come to muscle gain. And that paper didn't really show any majorly promising results from taking deloads or not taking them. If anything, it just said, well, you know, if you take a deload, it's not going to harm your muscle gain results, but it's not going to enhance them either. Now, I have made a whole video on deloads, so you just check it out there if you want to know more. But the whole point of a deload is to reduce training fatigue. Now, I spend a lot of time in gyms, and I can tell you that a lot of people do not train hard enough to warrant taking a deload ever. They need to focus first on the actual loading part. I think most people would be better off learning how they could train to the point of being broken by the end of a training block versus thinking, okay, when do I need to take some time off from this? Because a lot of people think that they are overtraining, whereas the feelings of needing a deload are a lot more multifaceted. You will feel like you are not really making any progress within a training block and maybe stalled across multiple lifts. Maybe you'll have some joint achiness. You'll have some irritability. Your sleep will be affected. You could have poor appetite. You could just have a general disdain for being in the gym. These are all symptoms of needing to take a deload. But if your recovery is sufficient, you will be able to put off taking deload for a long period of time. And this is something that when I first learned about deloads, I didn't really consider. And what I do consider now is looking back, if I was taking a deload every 4th or 5th week, at the end of a year, I essentially had a whole month where I wasn't doing any training. And that's not to actually bake into the fact that there were events across those years which warrant me taking time off training anyway. So that's what I do with myself and with my lifters now. I will get them to train all the way up until they get to the point where they actually physically need to deload. So we're being reactive versus proactive, or we'll try to push training out until a time within their calendar where they are going to be taking off some time anyway. Whether that's planned holiday time, it could be some time when life stress pops up and they're going to have to be out of the gym anyway. But being a lot more reactive towards it now is something that I'm an advocate for versus pre-planning it in. And the only times I really plan in a deload is when I'm working with powerlifters who have a pretty much set time to peak with their squat, bench, and deadlift, and planning their blocks in lead up to a competition. But if your goal is to just gain size and get jacked, you don't really need to consider deloads until you absolutely feel you need them. Because if you take them too often, you could just end up disrupting the flow and momentum that you've built within your training. And boy, do we know how hard that can be to get back once it's gone. Third on our overrated list is going to be fancy gym equipment. It is definitely not needed to build a good physique. In fact, many of the best physiques that we have ever seen up on a bodybuilding stage have been built with little more than barbells and dumbbells. Now, while I absolutely love using a good machine, a good prime piece, good Cybex piece, I very much recognize that they are shiny objects for most people, because it doesn't matter really what piece of equipment you have if you don't learn how to train properly and train with intensity. Back when I was getting into training about 15 years ago, just training with free weights was all of the rage. And I think it's becoming a little bit of a lost art. And free weights, barbells, dumbbells, even mastering your body weight are almost being seen as inferior movements. But I'll tell you what, if you can master a barbell squat, some type of barbell hinge, a barbell press, both overhead and horizontally, alongside some type of row and a pull-up, you are going to have a skill that is going to transcend to every piece of equipment that you go onto. And you'll be able to train effectively in any gym, anywhere in the world. You can't say the same for the person whose only ever squat pattern has been on the Cybex hack squat, and they feel they need that to grow their quads. Now, if you can master some very basic movements, you're going to become adaptable, and the need for fancy gym equipment, it becomes less of a need and more of a luxury. Now, the more advanced you get, the closer to your genetic ceiling you are. You can make the argument that these machines, and particularly having access to good machines and equipment, is far more important. But if you're in that beginner intermediate phase, this is very much the cherry on top. And you, my friend, need to focus on baking the whole fucking cake, because you have so much to gain by just outright working hard and learning to be a master of what you do have access to. Coming in at number 4 are going to be rigid meal plans and rigid macro targets. When it does come to putting on size, these things are just not needed. Can they be helpful? Sure. But when we consider that gaining muscle is a long-term process, anything that makes that process uber restrictive or hard to follow over the long term completely negates the goal. And for many people, they already find the diet to be the hardest part. And why make it any harder than it needs to be when you're setting up all these different ways that somebody can fail because you're not hitting their macro targets within 5 fucking grams? Or because they're not eating chicken, green beans, and rice 4 fucking times a day. If you're a hobby builder, somebody who wants to just get jacked, but you have no aspirations to get on stage, why should you follow an extremely rigid meal plan or extremely rigid macro targets? What would be better for you to do, whether you're in diet phase or gaining phase, is think about having a sufficient threshold that you want to meet with each macronutrient and achieving those targets within a range. For example, for some of my clients, versus saying I want you to hit 200 grams of protein every single day, I will say I want you to hit 200 grams of protein, but fall within 20 grams of that. So that's giving them essentially a 40 gram range, 180 all the way up to 220. It's giving them enough structure, but also enough flexibility so that they still have some way to plan and organize their diet. For other clients, I'll give them a minimum target. I'll say, I want you to hit at least 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, and I'll have that mapped out on their plan, what that actual number looks like. And that's the minimum target that I'd like them to aim for. Anything after that, it's profit. For fats, that minimum intake might be 25% of their total calories. And with carbohydrates, that can either fill up the rest of the calories that they have available on their plan, or at least be a minimum of 3 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram body weight, depending on what their calorie target is and if they can have that many carbohydrates on their plan. But these are nice little minimums that I get people to gravitate towards. And then once they're hitting these minimums, they're doing enough from having enough protein to prioritize anabolism, having enough fats there to prioritize hormone support, and have enough carbohydrates to support training performance. And then anything else after that is dictated by their preference. And this then allows them to have a more flexible approach to their hobby building goals, while still giving them some structure towards the macronutrients that matter for their goals. And then once we have the quantitative aspect taken care of, we can look a little more qualitatively. What staple sources of each macronutrient are we going to have? And we should probably have about 3 to 7 sources per macronutrient. And then when we take those foods and build them into meals, let's have 2 to 3 different breakfasts, lunch, dinners, and post-workouts that we can have a rotation as we get bored and as our preferences change across time. This way, you both have flexible targets, but a flexible plan that sits in line with your preferences, but still gets you to the goal. I'm 15 years into this bodybuilding process, and I've never needed a meal plan to get in shape because I follow these exact steps, and it keeps my diet interesting and enjoyable. Because it is so important that this is an enjoyable part of the process, because you're going to do it every single day. And nutrition has to support the training, but it should support the person and their preferences. And understand that that is going to look different for different people based off their preferences and even their culture. That's not even bringing into the fact that there's a life outside of bodybuilding and your diet. And this is why it's important to disregard things like rigid meal plans and rigid macro targets. Not saying that they don't have their place, but for the majority of people, they're completely overrated when it does come to building muscle. And coming in at number 5 is supplements, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, given that the hint is in the name. Supplementary. They are there to help add to the already effective training, the supportive nutrition that's organized in a way which we had already discussed, good sleep practice, and good stress management. Supplements are the final piece of the puzzle. Now, I've wasted a lot of money on supplements over the years, and thankfully I've learned from my errors, but the supplement industry is bigger than ever today. Producers are using extremely effective ways to promote their products, including taking your favorite influencer or bodybuilder and getting them to shill for a product that they may not even really be taking, or a product that's maybe even a very small margin of the results, and they are getting a kickback, whether that's free supplements or cash, and naturally they are going to tell you how good that brand or that supplement is and how effective it has been for them, and how since they've added it in, it's changed so much. But if you're an educated consumer, you can look beyond the marketing and actually look at the science to determine whether a supplement is actually effective for your muscle building goals. And this is where I personally refer to examine.com. I am not an affiliate of them. I just really fucking like their website. And I've been using this for over a decade now to vet all the supplements that I take and which I recommend to my clients. Because if I was to believe every single sales pitch that I saw on the internet, I would have a whole cupboard of supplements that are probably not going to do fuck all for me. Because Examine takes the research, synthesizes it into what are the main benefits of using a specific supplement, the drawbacks, dosing, but also what does all the research say in regards to its efficacy for certain effects within humans. Not just looking at rodent studies or in vitro studies, looking at what that particular supplement does for humans in outcome-based trials. And for me personally, it comes down to cost benefit. Relative to how much I'm going to spend on this actual supplement, how much of an effect am I going to get back from it? And for the majority of things, it's fuck all. Assuming that you are working towards building a better diet, you're probably not going to be completely deficient in many vitamins and minerals, aside from certain medical conditions which may need actual medical intervention and not just a supplement. But if you're a normal healthy person and you are eating a regular diet that's rich in whole foods, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, and the rest, you unlikely need to maybe add in something like a magnesium supplement or a fucking iron supplement. Something like creatine and caffeine, they can be incredibly effective for building muscle. And they're probably the two most researched supplements when it does come to their effects on performance and muscle gain. But outside of that, even the ones which I would have took in the past, the likes of citrulline malate, the likes of beta-alanine, the actual effect they have for how much you would pay for them, it's very small and almost pathetic to a degree. You'd probably be better off taking that money that you'd spend on those supplements and put it towards something that's going to give you a much bigger return on investment. That could be spending more on your groceries. That could be spending more on meal prep. That could be spending more on getting a coach and getting clear, consistent direction to your training and being shown how to stay clear of all this bullshit. And I understand the appeal. Supplements are a very easy part of the process, and you feel like you can just throw money at the problem and the problem will be solved. And unfortunately, you might be throwing a lot of money to get a 0.5 to even 1% benefit when you have 10%, 20% gaps within your actual approach that could be filled with just improvement habits overall before you look at going for the extra couple of percentage points. And that just about wraps up today's video on some of the most overrated topics when it does come to building muscle. If you did enjoy the video, click like. If you have not clicked subscribe already, please do so you can stay up to date with future videos. And if you have any disagreements or agreements, leave them in the comment section. I would love to see them. And before you click off the video, if you are somebody who needs clear, consistent direction towards your training and building to physique you want, while also avoiding all of the nonsense that we see online, you can click the WhatsApp link in the description, which is going to bring you straight to my private WhatsApp where you can discuss how my one-to-one coaching can work for you to get you towards that physique that you've always wanted. That's it. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.